Welcome back, casual gardeners. Now we can go inside. Much warmer in here. Despite all of this snow, I still have spring fever. So this video is going to be all about some flowers that you can plant early in the spring to help beat that spring fever just as soon as we're able to. And because I am aware that some of you out there are growing in containers, I've chosen all flowers that will work well in containers in the early spring. So this is for you as well. If you're a balcony gardener, mwah! The very first flower we got to talk about is pansies. They are a classic, and they're a classic for a reason. These very cold hardy plants, I mean, these are flowers that can get snowed on and be okay, will bloom alongside some of our earliest spring blooming bulbs. In fact, you can interplant with pansies to help color up your bulb beds a little bit. Here in USDA Zone 6, if you're starting from seed, you want to start your pansies in January or February. So it's just barely not too late to start your pansies from seed if you intend to grow pansies in your garden in the spring. I prefer to buy my pansies from nurseries or big box stores because they're an annual. I'm not super committed to them, and they do take up a lot of space in my greenhouse or in my sunroom. With pansies and most flowers, the more sun they get, the more flowers you'll get. But pansies can tolerate part shade if that's all you've got. And see, part shade I would consider somewhere between 4 and 6 hours of sunlight a day. Full sun would be more than 6 hours a day. If you're growing from seed, the seedlings can be planted out just as soon as the ground is workable. Even with hardening off, you may want to wait until just 2 or 3 weeks before your last frost to plant out your adult pansies. If you are planting in containers, do keep in mind that the roots of your plants are going to be less protected from the cold than if they were growing in the ground. Especially in containers, you're going to want to hold off until after the last frost for most of these. During the growing season, after your flowers start developing flower buds, if you're growing in the ground, you will benefit from providing a fertilizer about every 3 or 4 weeks that is a 5-10-5 fertilizer. So that is a little bit heavier on the phosphorus. Pansies love them some phosphorus. If you're growing in containers, you may need to fertilize a little bit more frequently, depending on how you water. Now, violas tend to be a little bit less heat tolerant than pansies, so they won't grow as late into the spring, early summer as a pansy would, but they are also a little bit more cold tolerant. Pansies and violas are the same genus, if not basically the same flower, with just different degrees of breeding. So I'm not devoting a whole lot of time to the violas, but they are also a really great early spring flower, so consider them. With violas, if you're starting from seed, which will save you a ton of money, you're better off just sowing your seeds in the fall, late fall, and then allowing your seedlings to overwinter or to germinate in the spring and just come up where they are. But of course, you can buy them pre-grown as plants from a nursery or big box store as well. Stock flowers, S-T-O-C-K, are actually new to me. I discovered them while I was researching for this video. They are apparently members of the brassica family, the cabbage family, that are grown for their flowers. And not only do they have lovely blossoms that we can enjoy, but those blossoms, I understand, smell a little bit like cloves. And so they are going to stink up your garden in a most delightful way. Stock flowers are another one that prefers full sun, but will go part shade if they have to. You can start them indoors just like your other cole crops. This is a brassica, and it's got a lot in common with them in terms of its needs. You can start about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost of the season. Well, depending on your climate, you can get them out there no later than your last frost date. When you're planting stock, either space them 6 to 12 inches or thin them 6 to 12 inches, depending on what you've done. If you are sowing stock direct from seed in the ground, this is another one that you can do as soon as the ground is workable. Ornamental cabbage and kale aren't there. We don't grow them for their flowers. They're a biennial, so we won't see their flowers this year, ideally anyway. But they do have very lovely, colorful foliage. Because they are foliage plants, you are going to be able to enjoy their color from as soon as they develop that color all the way through the year. They will tend to bolt as the weather gets hot, so you may not be able to keep your ornamental cabbage or kale all year long, but they will last a while. These are something you would start from seed indoors about 8 weeks before your last frost, or if you're direct sowing, go about 2 to 4 weeks before your last frost, just for best results. You may know that cabbage and kale are really hardy, and you can probably sow them directly earlier than that if you really want to. How you space these is going to depend on the cultivar. Snapdragons are another very popular, very traditional early spring flowering plant that can be very cold tolerant. I had them overwinter regularly when I lived in USDA Zone 7. I don't think that'd be as likely here, but it could still happen. They are a short-lived perennial. They're not a true annual, but since they only flower really well, reliably, their first year, we mostly treat snapdragons as an annual. They can take a while to mature, so most people fire them up indoors 8 to 10 weeks before the last frost. If you're starting from seed, the starts can be planted out about 2 weeks before your last frost. If you're buying plants, you may want to wait until about the last frost for your area to snug them into their beds. Snapdragons can be prolific self-seeders, so you may be lucky enough to only need to plant them the one time and then have them come back year after year in your garden. It doesn't hurt to collect some seeds to start again the following year. Seeds are very easy to collect, almost as easy as poppy seeds. This is a flower that prefers full sun, but it seems to be pretty shade tolerant. Another thing to look for with snapdragons is you may notice if your summer gets hot enough that they will go dormant in the middle of the summer. They may come back and flower again in the fall. So you don't need to yank them out in the summer just because you don't see flowers anymore. They could come back. Snapdragons love them some bumblebees. A bumblebee is heavy enough to force its way into the flower and will generally be happier pollinating it. So if you also love bumblebees, snapdragons should go on your bumblebee support planting list as well. If you buy sweet alyssum from a nursery or a big box store, that can be planted out as soon as the danger of frost has passed, usually a few weeks after your last frost date. You can also choose to direct sow your alyssum in the beginning of the year as soon as the soil is workable, but you'll generally get better results starting indoors about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. Sweet alyssum is a prolific bloomer. You may find that it slows down a little bit in the summer, but if you cut it back toward the end of the warmer part of the season, it will have another go through the fall. It prefers full sun. But this is a plant that does not mind being shaded a little bit by nearby plants. And because of that, I've found that sweet alyssum is a really great flower to just kind of wedge in and interplant in your vegetable garden, just between your vegetable plants. And when you do that, you are attracting a lot of beneficial insects further into your garden, as well as pollinators that will improve the yields of some of your crops. This is a very happy container plant if you don't allow it to dry out too much. Don't let it go bone dry, or else you'll have to get more sweet alyssum. Another big plus for me is that sweet alyssum will fill your garden with the scent of honey. It smells so amazing. On a warm summer day with a mild breeze, it can turn a garden into a little slice of paradise. Calendula, aka pot marigold, is more cold tolerant and so can be planted out sooner than the African marigolds that most of us think about. They're not remotely the same flower, but we wind up calling them both marigolds. You can direct sow calendula early in the winter or immediately in the spring as soon as the ground is workable. It is a reliable germinator. It will come up well if you do that. If you really want to, you can start it indoors a few weeks before your last frost, but it germinates so well outdoors on its own that it's really a waste of space. If you buy calendula, you can plant them out after danger of frost has passed, which is still pretty early in the season. The name calendula means little calendar because they would bloom reliably at a certain point in the spring, and just help you know when in the year it was. I'm assuming that's before wall calendars were a thing. The name pot marigold refers to the fact that people used to cook with calendula. It was added as a seasoning and probably coloring to foods to just make them a little bit more fancy. While calendula is not called pot marigold because it does well in pots, it also does well in pots. You will get your best blooms from this sunny little flower in full sun. I've intentionally left perennials out of this video because most of the perennials that bloom the earliest in the spring are planted the previous fall. Yeah, that's the bulb perennials. I have made a video in which I talk about bulbs. And if you're thinking about bulbs right now and you're just like, well, now I want to know about bulbs, I'll go ahead and provide a link to that at the end of this video and also down in the description. So you can find that one as well. The earliest bloomers are hellebores, dwarf iris, daffodils, and hyacinths. Tulips, creeping phlox, and columbine will lighten your spirit a little bit later in the spring, but still pretty early. But yeah, that's this whole video. If you want to learn more about the bulbs, again, down there, or they're going to appear over there, I think. I want to thank you all for joining me here in my garden today, even though it's pretty snowy. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.